All right, let's cut that short. Let's get this thing rolling here. By now, everyone who's been around with the Badge Brigades know I like these long-winded, these throwing all the nicknames out there intros. This one, I'm going to switch it up because there's just one title. There's one title. The Showdown King. Cody Main from ETR, bringing him in here. Let's talk this through, my friend.
Way too kind. Way too kind. Showdown King. I don't know. A Showdown Virgin is much more fitting, but I will accept the crown of Showdown King.
Yeah, well, I mean, from what I've seen in the streets, I'm giving you the king title. I
Appreciate
mean,
that.
just for anyone who is in the underdog side and watches us and doesn't really cross over into the DFS, just go to Cody's Twitter, CMain7, click on that first link that's pinned there. Evergreen Showdown correlation patterns. It is the baseline basis of knowledge and entry point to just thinking through these contests. And it's free, which is incredible. Yeah.
It's amazing. I did an Evergreen article, I think 2 years ago, shortly after I had started at ETR, maybe the year after I had started at ETR. And Adam had asked me to update that article the following summer. And I'm like, it's an Evergreen article. You know, it's there forever. And I was reading through that article. I'm like, oh my God, so much of the Showdown meta has changed and it's no longer Evergreen. That article is certainly fresh and up to date with kind of how the field has responded to Showdown. You're going to have to talk me through the underdog side, my man, because you're the pro over there. Hopefully we can apply some of like the DraftKings knowledge and some of the stuff that I've picked up on in single game formats to what we're doing over on Underdog, because I'm excited to pick your brain on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there with the formats. They've messed around a couple times. They started with like a 20,000 person GPP on the first Thursday night of the year, and it's just dupe city or max enter and hope you get some combination of ADP 1 2 3 to fall to you, and then everybody's like, whoa, collusion, and right. That person wins the prize pool. And then all of a sudden they expanded. We went full PPR and we incorporated quarterbacks and kickers. So that's a fun wrinkle. They dialed down the contest size to about 5,000 and would repopulate them over the course of like the given draft window as they filled, opposed to having one massive one. So thus trying to eliminate dupes. I imagine that was the thought process. And then tonight is the first time they've done basically a cash game format where it's a triple up. You can still get 150 max entries in, but it's a much flatter payout structure and it's top 33%, or actually it's top 30% because of the rake, but top 30% of the prize pool triples up. So it definitely changes our strategies and our approach to that contest, and it becomes less of a GPP. But we'll talk some of the GPP stuff because they still have a 2-game contest, which is my personal favorite, which is Thursday night and now Sunday morning with that London game. So yeah, just in terms of that, when you hear this and you're thinking about a draft style showdown game, like where would you attack? Like where would you from both a build standpoint and from a play standpoint? Let's start on the build side.
Yeah, I mean, I think correlation is still important, and maybe you could speak more to this on the draft style, but probably underutilized, where people are just trying to jam ADP and trying to jam the best projected plays. That's probably right in, more of a cash game triple up style contest, but you really need to kind of emphasize correlation, which is also going to lead to more of a unique roster construction, right? Like on tonight's slate, you might have tonight's slate might not be a great example because it's like Cortland Sutton and Russ are kind of the best 2 projected plays, but maybe on a normal slate, the best 2 projected plays are a wide receiver 1 and a running back 1 on the same team. And maybe those aren't necessarily negatively correlated. But then if you maybe drop down from like the wide receiver, or from the running back 1 to the quarterback, or drop down to, wide receiver 2 and just hope for a pass eruption type of thing, sacrificing a little bit of projection in order to get correlation and uniqueness is something that has been extremely successful in DraftKings Showdown. And if you're trying to limit dupes and, in these, if they are more GPP style payout structures, then roster construction is important, being unique is important, and then correlation is important, just playing for that upside. Just kind of setting it up as these if-then statements, which I think that's all Showdown is. That's all really any single game format is. If X happens, then what's going to happen next because of that as a result. If my 101 is Cortland Sutton, what's a better pick with my two, my second pick, right? So thinking through those in a draft style roster construction is the way that I would think through it. It just gets really tough if the options are limited and you just you get in a room where you don't get those options to fall to you, right? In DraftKings, everyone's got the same access to the player pool as you and I do. It gets a little bit different on Underdog and on draft style contests. So now that's where I want to pick your brain on like how much crossover really is there between the correlation and uniqueness stuff that we talk about on DraftKings, like with something like this.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is back end uniqueness. So still highlighting those highly projected 200 through 3K salary players, but then instead of using the salary, using ADP as that threshold. So let's target those players on the back end of these drafts that are 11 through 13 in ADP that others are afraid to touch, and we get exploitative exposure on them because of that. So tonight's slate, as you alluded to, might not be the best for that because, on the DK side, we're going to end up with a lot of Philip Lindsay at 400 and stuff like this. Whereas like Philip Lindsay is going to be drafted 100% in these contests. So we might have to look to go even deeper than Philip Lindsay to get unique. That being said, this is a cash game style contest tonight than opposed to the GPP style. So maybe we take that knowledge and we focus that on the 2-game slate when we jump in some drafts here, opposed to on the single game slate. But in terms of correlation, I think we have to get creative where on DraftKings we can go, okay, if I set the rule that I have quarterback captain, I want 2 pass catchers. Or if I have wide receiver captain, I want his passer in my flex. We don't have that luxury here, and we have to find other, sneaky correlations where it's maybe running back tight end where we can get it or stuff of that magnitude. So I'd be interesting to hear from you now that we have kickers in the pool, now that we have some of this, where are some positive correlation spots that you isolate in Showdown, but maybe us in the Underdog aren't necessarily thinking of yet?
Yeah, and you hit on some of the big ones, and maybe a suggestion for Underdog. I don't know if this is a possibility. I know everyone hates this, but like DSTs too can you add DSTs to the pool. Another way to get unique, just another option to draft, and it expands your pool a little bit of rosterable options and
It
kind of sets up.
also, sorry to cut you off. It also adds what we don't have is extreme scoring volatility late in ADP.
Right.
Because you're effectively late in ADP, you're hunting that second tight end or whatever who's just going to get 7 points by falling into the end zone, right? So adding defense, you could really add outlier scoring and reverse engineer negative and positive correlation with certain builds in doing so.
The one thing about DraftKings Showdown is like correlation's important, but it's important up to a point because if that correlation starts to make your lineups more duplicated, then they're less EV, right? So that would be an interesting thing too with like the Underdog stuff in a GPP style payout structure where like yes, you want to correlate, but are you correlating too much to the point where your draft is now your roster is more likely to be duplicated. So sometimes like the anti-correlation matters, and that gets in the whole if then questions that we always go through with Showdown is like, am I correlating too much or not correlating enough? I think you hit on a couple of the big ones with correlation. Like if you're drafting a wide receiver with your 101, you want to do what you can to get his quarterback. Quarterbacks are generally going to project higher just on a base perspective. So I'm sure quarterbacks are probably the first drafted players off the board here. And then that might also set you up to get unique because Cortland Sutton, everyone's going to gravitate towards Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. They're going to be top picks on a slate like this. But what if Eric Saubert, the tight end, won now because Albert O can't get his butt on the field anymore? What if Eric Saubert is the guy that scores a touchdown or scores 2 touchdowns, God forbid, right? Like, so that is an interesting way that in a GPP style contest, in a draft style contest, I would be looking to get unique that way.
Yeah, no, I really like that line of thinking for sure. One thing that I will throw back at you is when the quarterbacks, because this is only our second ever single game slate with quarterbacks. So that's just speaking to the infancy of this game. Like we don't really know anything yet. Um, but in a slate where we have quarterbacks and their ADPs are naturally thrust up because of their projections, especially in a cash game format, do your eyes gravitate to back stacking them with a third or fourth receiver option? Or would you be comfortable just, hey, those are the raw points. I accept the fact that somebody else is going to have Judy, Sutton, and Hamler or whatever, and I will find, the punch it in touchdown from, the third running back of whoever, right? Like uh probably Philip Lindsay, I guess, would fit
Right.
that mold. Yeah, I guess Philip or Deion Jackson would fit that mold a little bit if he's
Mhm.
active. Yeah.
In a cash style contest, and you'll have to talk to me about like how early kickers were going
Mhm.
in the drafts that you were doing, or maybe we can just hop into one and kind of rip through these and
Yeah.
discuss it on the fly. But like in that style, I would be more into the kickers just based off of
Okay.
the scoring. But I don't know how deep like we're talking, because if you draft a Russell Wilson, you're likely to miss out on Sutton and Judy. So then you're asking like, would I be more into somebody like a KJ Hamler or Eric Saubert or Montreal Washington, like in a cash style contest? Probably not. I'm probably just looking to lock up the best median.
Mhm.
And in that respect, like there's just so many ranges for those guys where they score well below their projected outcome and like even in the zeros. Whereas like the kickers, depending on where they're going in these contests, just offer, much safer floor. And then mention
Mhm.
somebody like, Deion Jackson or somebody like that, who is kind of in
Yeah.
that same vein of just so many zeros within their range of outcome. So despite having the quarterback, I wouldn't be forcing like a back stack just because I have him. I would
Okay.
be more looking to lock up just like the best projected type lineup in a contest that is more of a triple up than a GPP style payout.
Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's interesting. It's just weird to think through because it's such a new structure.
So how
Um,
early were the kickers going in like so this is the second overall slate where we've had quarterbacks and kickers. Was
mhm.
the field pretty
And
sharp to that early on?
one thing I'll note about the kickers is the scoring system slightly different.
Okay.
It's -2 for an extra point. It's -1 for a missed field goal. It's 4 points for a field goal greater than 50 yards, and then it's just 3 points for all other field goals.
Oh wow, so it's different.
Yeah. So
Okay,
so
so that
it,
that does
it
change it a little bit. Okay,
it's this situation where the projected floor of a kicker
yeah,
isn't necessarily as high as we think it is
okay.
in DFS, but yeah, I don't know. It's a
What a
very fun balancing act to just think through, right?
That
Because
is an interesting scoring wrinkle. What a tilting time it would be if you roster the kicker and there's like 4 touchdowns and they get what, -8 points in that scenario, or -4 points in that scenario because you lose points for.
no, you don't lose points for extra point. You
Oh,
lose
okay,
points for a missed extra point.
missed extra point.
It's still
Gotcha.
1 for extra point. It's -2 for a missed extra point. It's 1 for an extra point.
Okay, I heard that
Yeah.
wrong. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, I might have said it wrong too. For
I was gonna
um,
say that would suck.
yeah, no doubt. What do you think? Just we go with Russ, Pittman, Sutton there. I think
Yeah,
just in terms of raw point projection and treating this as a triple up, my eyes gravitate to Ryan and Melvin Gordon here. Do you see the same?
yeah, do agree with that. And the
Okay.
the board kind of shook out the way I would expect. I know that people are down on Matt Ryan,
Hmm.
and rightfully so. But just in a positionless format, and like that's where the carryover is here. Like you don't, it's super flex, it's positionless basically. Like you don't have to roster any certain position, so you don't have to worry about getting squeezed out on a particular player or a
Hmm.
particular position, I should say. So quarterbacks are just always going to have the best projectable floor, and in a
Hmm.
triple up, that's kind of what I want.
So, in that vein, would you then re rank this ordering of kind of like Russ Ryan or Ryan Russ at your 1-2 picks?
Sutton's so different,
Mm,
and just in this, just because of his projectable volume, that Sutton still probably ends up being the 1-2. But I
okay.
think Pittman went ahead of Ryan, right? I think I would take Matt Ryan over Pittman in this style of contest.
Okay.
Oh, so
Yeah. So,
Sutton,
if we,
yeah,
yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
interesting. Okay, it
Um,
gets ugly pretty quick, huh? especially on a slate
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah, and this is also to note, this is the first time they've ran four-man drafts. So they've always been three. So they've been 12-player deep pools prior to this. This is the first night having 4 players per draft. So
Interesting. Very
yeah,
interesting.
it's fun. It's they're definitely there's definitely still a lot of kinks in both the scoring system and how the contests are run and whatnot. But they're I commend Underdog greatly for manipulating and playing with, while they still have to offer, overhead, and they still have to put up this capital for guaranteed prize pools, to be this flexible in manipulating the game and trying new things, right?
Right. Do you think we'll
Um,
get to a point where we have a GPP style contest again on this, or are they going to have to roll with the?
No, I think they're experimenting with this to roll back to GPP.
Gotcha.
That would be just my inclination. Um, Opposing kicker with running back and pass catcher.
Yeah, I think that's pretty sharp correlation there too.
Okay.
And the projectable floor is a little bit lower on kickers here, but I still like kickers in these cash style contests.
Hmm.
Um, because we have Matt Ryan, like I'm more into having the opposing kicker, because if we have Matt Ryan, we're hoping he's throwing touchdowns, which
Hmm.
is fewer points for our kicker. We want our kicker to be scoring field goals. And I know we've got Melvin Gordon, so we're kind of projecting Melvin Gordon hopefully to find the end zone. But I'm with you on that. Not a huge fan of Paris Campbell, but I think that's just kind of where the board fell to us.
Uh-huh.
Alberto is dust. KJ Hamler, I mean, we don't know what the role is going to be. Kendall Hinton is not going to be on the active roster tonight, which is interesting.
Is
So
that is that confirmed?
that is confirmed. He was not
Oh,
called
I
up.
missed that.
So,
Oh, okay. That's a
but
good nugget.
yeah, which is interesting. So like KJ Hamler's decent. You could get into a situation where like maybe Tyree Cleveland or Montreal Washington is
Okay.
in play, but like that's we start to get pretty thin there.
Yeah. Especially Washington's big special teamer, right? Like he's
Big
kickoff
special teamer.
return and
Mhm.
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so we think it's probably Hamler, but again, would not be surprised to see Tyree Cleveland sneak in there as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's just look at the board for 1 second. The board actually disappears here. Let's see if I can do. No, the board's gonna disappear on us. Damn it. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Feeling through
It would be
the one.
interesting to rip one of these drafts as if it was a GPP and kind of talk through like how our correlation and uniqueness would go, but I don't want you to burn through an entry.
Oh, it's fine. It's $10. We can do that. But we can also do that in the 2-game contest.
Okay, then we'll wait
Yeah.
for that because I'm interested in that format as well. Because is that a more regular style roster construction, like a
Yes.
traditional in that sense?
Yeah. So there's a one quarterback, one tight end, and then there's 4 positions to choose from. You have to have one mandatory 2 wide receivers and 1 running back, and then your flex can be either or.
Nice. Okay, I like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and that one's actually half point PPR.
Okay.
So they're kind of balancing this
Mhm.
between the two. Okay, so we missed the last pick by looking at this board, but just in general, from like let's treat this as the cash game and the floor roster construction. Ideal roster construction that could fall to us would be quarterback plus number 1 pass catcher for either side.
Yeah, agreed. I think in this format, the Russ Wilson, Jerry Judy team is pretty sharp.
Hmm.
I think that is an ideal structure. I would imagine in most non Matt Ryan contests that it would go quarterback.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
way I would ideally draft. There's kind of an outlier situation here with Cortland Sutton that I think the projectable volume is too good to
Mhm.
rank Matt Ryan above him. But I would not draft Michael Pittman above Matt Ryan. So you want quarterback. Ideally, you get a top pass catcher with him. But like where we stacked up with the opposing running back, I think is pretty good too. We have the opposing RB1 there with really good projectable volume as well. And then
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to see like how, I mean, you could run this historically too, but it would be interesting to look at like how different is kicker scoring in with this scoring format than it is from like
From
DraftKings,
DK. Yeah, that's it. That's
because
true.
then you could start to see if they're as good of plays as they are on DraftKings. Historically in cash games, kickers have been really strong plays in DraftKings
Mhm.
cash. So if it's even close to a 1v1, then, getting a kicker there in the third round where you have guys like Malik Cox and Alec Pierce being drafted is really
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that for sure. One thing I'd like to ask is cash versus GPP in this style of the super flex where we're drafting, just four of whatever position. Do you gravitate to 3 1s? Because you can't go fours, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if I said that prior. You cannot go fours. You have to have same thing as DK where you have to at least be 5-1. 3-1 or 2-2s, or how are you thinking about that?
I would be thinking through it in terms of a portfolio, and that's kind of the way that I've always played. I have
Mhm.
switched a little bit more on DraftKings this season to smaller field, higher stakes, single entry stuff. It just felt a little bit more comfortable with kind of where my duplicates are at over on DraftKings. But in this, where it's a $10 entry, I would be thinking through it in terms of like trying to build a portfolio of lineups that I think have a shot to get first place if it is GPP style. And that's where you talked about the 3-1, the 1-3s. I would imagine if you went one Bronco, three Colts in these style of drafts, you'd be relatively unique.
Mhm.
I would also be like in this particular draft, I probably would have foregone the projectable volume and the base projection of someone like Melvin Gordon with our second pick and maybe gone to like an Alec Pierce or somebody like that, where I lock up that correlation and get a unique roster construction. Maybe that's
Okay.
sacrificing a little bit too much. But you can start to think through like how different do I need to beat the field size that I'm in to secure first place and secure first place by myself, which is like all that matters in
Mhm.
GPP, where it's going to be heavily duplicated like this.
Okay, so now let's pretend this was a GPP style contest like it was last week, and we're talking about that Alec Pierce versus Melvin Gordon. From a game theory standpoint, does it bother you at all that we could effectively be giving up someone else a super team by passing on certain forms of value? Whereas, on DK, if I put in a product own of 30%, I'm not giving anything up. I'm just less likely to win in projectable points, right?
That's the problem, right? And you
Mhm.
probably know that more than anything. Like you have to not only consider what you're doing for your own team, but you have to consider how that affects all the other teams that you're allowing to be built based off of the decision that you just made. And
Mhm.
maybe Melvin to Alec Pierce or even Melvin to Mo Alley Cox or something like that was maybe too much. Maybe we just maybe we go like Naheem Hines there, who is the pass catching back there, and then get different elsewhere. But like with just four spots, it seems like it's so difficult to you know and I don't know how it depends on the field size too, where
Mhm.
one thing at the back end of your draft could get you unique, but like where the field size could potentially be larger and where the payout structure is what it is for GPPs. I think you have to think through things that are, a little less comforting from like a win rate perspective and think through it from like an EV perspective.
Yeah, and just jump on that classic GPP mentality where it's like first or last.
Right.
Let's make sure we have, four guys under 10% or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, maybe you can do that with just getting a guy that like projects for 1 point, like further down the board. Maybe
Okay.
we like with this lineup, maybe you had I don't know, like a Deion Jackson last and just kind of hope that we get maybe a dump off or something from Matt Ryan to Deion Jackson. Maybe that's enough to get you a little bit off the board. But it's such an interesting format the way that it is set up. And when we get back to
Mhm.
those GPP style payouts, it would be interesting to see like how much does it really take to be unique and how often are certain drafts and certain rosters duplicated.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much potential with this contest, but like we're still yearning to find what it actually should look like, right? And I think defense is a really good step in the right direction would be adding defense to this contest. Other people have thrown out the ideas of like IDP or a pseudo captain spot where either your fourth round pick was 1.5 or your first round pick was 1.5.
I was thinking about that when I hopped on and we're thinking through like ideas of how this format could be improved. I didn't even think about the fourth round pick being 1.5, which is I think a better way to structure this than the first round pick being 1.5. Right,
Yeah,
because at that
yeah.
point, you have less interest in playing for median projection and just more so in, like, which guy can give me that absolute ceiling to win this draft, and then you start playing different combinations without having to sacrifice, like, a bunch of projection up top. In the 4th round, we're talking about guys like Paris Campbell, Alberto, KJ Hamler. It's really pretty weak down there, but you can start to look
Mhm.
at some options that do have some upside. And if you're going to give me 1.5x for drafting them, then yeah, I mean, hell yeah, sign me up. I'll start taking the volatility and the ceiling over projectable volume and base projection all day.
Yeah, because I love the dynamic that would introduce of forcing your hand to take um, like Ashton Doolin
Hmm.
over um, Alec Pierce. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't come to that extreme a level, but maybe yeah, it just kind of introduces a new wrinkle in chasing ceiling. Um,
One more thing that I think they could do, and maybe this is just because I'm way too comfortable rostering these guys because of the DraftKings style and the large fields
mhm.
over there. What if they just had another round? Like Ashton Doolin
Yeah.
didn't get drafted here. Deion Jackson didn't get drafted here. Those guys are often going to give you, close to zero, but it is
Mhm.
just another way to get unique and another way to kind of balance out the rosters here a little bit.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And I've even thrown that idea out for the main slate because the fact that you're playing a 12 game main slate with 6-person drafts over and over again, like ownership consolidates so densely around those top game environments. Like we had Herzig on and then Leone on this morning as well. And we talked around like projected ownership models that we could potentially build just based on knowing ADP. And that's the only variable, the only shared known variable right now, and just kind of like, oh my God, like there's 200 viable players who are within, I don't know, 6 to 8 projectable fantasy points from the 6th round, right? Like
Yeah,
onward.
right.
Yeah, it's crazy because yeah, I don't know. I just throwing it out
That
there.
so many players in the main slate that are likely not even drafted that like could win a main slate. You know what I mean? And it'd
Exactly.
be a similar situation on Showdown, be a little bit different just because you don't have those guys. But personally, I could not imagine a single game slate where I'm not considering guys like Eric Sauber and those types of plays because they've just
Hmm.
always been in play. So if you give another round, it's just another roster spot to get unique. I kind of like that idea.
Let's jump into one of these. They've already filled one of the Thursday Londons, they're calling them. So the first one was a little bit bigger. This one is 5,500 entries. A pretty flat payout structure up top, going from 5K to 3,750, 2,500, 18. With that, I mean, I guess you can't say at a glance, but would that kind of change your draft style to be more floor oriented because it is a little flatter than your traditional GPP?
Yeah, I still think we're chasing first here. It looks like it drops
Mhm.
like really flat top three to top five, maybe, and then it looked like it dropped off quite a bit to like 10th. Where usually you like to
Uh,
see like 10% of first
yeah,
goes to 10th, but it drops off
yeah.
pretty quickly. But in this style, you're less upset about getting second, third, or fourth right there because usually we see these GPPs payout structures just be awful. In the sense that it's like so much of the prize pool goes to first place and then an instant drop off. And this, it's a little bit flatter through the first three or four or five, but then you see that pretty significant drop off after that. So they
Yeah,
must be paying out. They're either paying out a bigger portion of the field, or we just have a situation where like it's instead of giving all of that money to first, like you traditionally see, they just spread that out a little bit.
I think it's the latter. I think
Yeah.
it's but I also think it's experimental too because like so many of these contests they're so new, right? So I think they are feeling their way through it. And I played a lot of baseball this year, and we kind of had an open discourse in some of the Discord channels and that sort of thing where they were manipulating payout structures based on our suggestion,
Mhm.
which was I mean incredible, right? Like just to have that kind of one-to-one relationship with the company is pretty profound. But just to talk it through, we were kind of lobbying for flatter payout structures as the quote unquote rake payers playing max entries every day, right? Because it was pretty hard to justify playing 40 entries, which is not just one click of a CSV. It's I'm
Time
putting in
commitment.
man hours, yeah,
Yeah.
right. And like if you're doing multiple at a time, or if you're auto drafting them with rank sheets, you're ending up with negative correlation, especially in baseball, where all of a sudden you have a hitter stack against a pitcher that you didn't intend to because you just uploaded a rank sheet, right? So,
Right.
anyways, a long-winded way to say that we kind of lobbied for the flatter in general. Oh my, we're already on the clock here. So this is a 4-man. This is both the contest. I don't know if you've looked at Sunday morning yet,
I have not, but I think we can talk through these teams together. What's the strat here with
Okay.
the 102? Obviously, Barkley would have been nice as the clear cut best projectable volume on this slate, but what's the strat here now that he's gone?
Yeah, I think I've been gravitating towards Alpha Pass Catcher
Yeah.
after he's gone,
And this is
and
half
just
PPR, right?
this is
Okay.
half PPR. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I
Yeah,
like that.
I think Barkley's the clear 101. We did a couple of these on stream the other day before Jonathan Taylor was ruled out, and actually took some Barkley plus Taylor
Ah,
in like the 6th round just to, I mean, shoot the ceiling, and you get a swap option. Or in theory, you would have got a swap option, but by the time in which we were doing it, he had a doubtful tag, which doesn't allot us the swap option.
uh,
So it was high variance, but then you're effectively taking a swing at the 101 and the 102, or 1A and 1B, to then get them. This is basically what I was hoping for, is Russ comes back.
yeah. Get the
Yeah,
stack, lock it up.
yeah, and I think it's a conventional way of approaching these. I
Mhm.
don't think it's always feasible and happens. How do you feel just in general about a double stack in a contest like this? Like, do you
And it's
think
four. It's a four. How many roster spots do we have total?
6?
6. Okay. Yeah, I don't
Ju-
know that it's necessarily. Well, yeah. Now that Judy goes, probably not necessary given the remaining pass catching options. But we do have a nice bring back there
we
with
could do the
Pittman
bring back.
and Hines. So
Yeah, we don't have a running back. Running back gets kind of thin, I guess, but I think it's already been thin enough that we just take the alpha pass catcher in Pittman.
mhm.
Like, I don't have the projections open in front of me, but like, what's the projectable difference between Hines and Philip Lindsay tonight?
Yeah, I mean it's like 5 points. But when
Okay.
you start thinking through the pass catchers that you would be getting to into at that point, like I don't know, maybe Mike Boone makes it back to us if we wanted to kind of stack up heavily on in
Hmm.
that Broncos offense.
Well,
But
one note
I would not be all upset with walking away with in this draft with a Philip Lindsay either.
Okay. I've been two things. Just noting that the player behind us, like, I've been doing this from a game theory standpoint, like where I always bring up the board and I'm always hyper aware of who's behind us. Like,
Mhm.
okay, now no running backs can go behind us, kind of thing. And the Saquon owner may only go one, so maybe we can go tight end or pass catcher again here,
Yep.
and we don't have to. Yeah, just little like micro things, like micro edges in every draft environment.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know the status of these Giants guys right now.
God, they're
How do
really
we
thin. I think they're going to be down to Richie James, David Sills, and someone who's not even on the board right now.
hmm. Okay, so
So
do you like Richie James, Sills, or Mike Boone here? Because he can still take another running back. That's the thing.
yeah, I think there's enough projectable difference between Boone and Lindsay that
And
we just
Lindsey.
take Boone there.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
so
I
much
like
there's
that
so much
too.
input volatility on Lindsay that, we're expecting him to come off the practice squad and earn a decent amount of the base work. They've never really been into giving Naheem Hines that work, but it could be Deion Jackson. They could use Naheem Hines more than we're expecting. So there's a lot of outcomes where Philip Lindsay gives you a straight up 0.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Is he in your? I mean, he must be at 400 tonight to be in your player pool.
Oh, baby. Yeah, I'm gonna load up
Yeah,
at 400 for sure. And
yeah.
like we see this, and I've looked at this historically. I like Richie James as a pick there.
Okay.
I think the volume's good. He's obviously much better in PPR, but I mean they're gonna have to throw to somebody.
Hmm.
The interesting thing, like talking back on DraftKings with these really cheap guys, is you end up leaving so much money on the table that the field doesn't get over invested, maybe as much as you would think, despite how well they project from a baseline.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the point I brought up with Dink on the ETR show was we had Debo Samuel, and now that I'm thinking back, I think it was 2 years ago, where Debo Samuel was coming off IR, and everybody in the industry had projected him for the normal Debo Samuel role at that point of his career anyway, and he
Hmm.
was $200 on DraftKings. And a $200 Debo Samuel for what we knew of his role at that point in time should have been 90% owned, right? And
Yeah.
only got up to 39%. So hear a lot of chatter of Philip Lindsay getting steamed, Philip Lindsay being too owned. $400
Mhm.
Philip Lindsay is not $200 Debo Samuel. So I don't see that getting too much over, 25, maybe 30% max. I know
Mhm.
we're playing with a little bit of a sharper field now,
Yep.
but going to be a good play tonight on DraftKings and in these
Yeah.
formats too.
From the tight end perspective, it's pretty thin. Do we want to quote unquote over correlate and just go all in on the Broncos here, or do you think that's even too extreme and we should just rely on a Giants pass catcher?
Yeah, I mean, we have Richie James already as a giant pass catcher. I'm kind of into Eric Saubert, so I think we take
Okay.
Saubert, and I can talk through that a little bit because I've kind of been in the weeds on Saubert,
Uh-huh.
Saubert, whatever it
Robert.
is.
Yeah.
Alberto has kind of lost his role in this offense just because of his
3 snaps
inability.
last week.
Yeah, just and
Yeah.
it sounds like it's just an inability to run block, and they don't
Mm.
want to keep him on the field in those situations, so they're just not playing him at all.
Mhm.
and as long as the team continues to win, the team continues to perform, they're going to keep Eric Saubert out there running routes. He ran a route on 83% of dropbacks last week.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It isn't getting a huge target share, but is getting targeted downfield. So I don't know if that's as a result of like play action and him just streaking up the seam, or if it's designed. But
Mm,
he's got a 17.7 ADOT, and he's got two end zone targets, in the
mm.
first couple of weeks of the season. If he's going to play a full
Um,
time role, also going to get us unique. I can't imagine that Eric Saubert's getting drafted a whole lot, and
mhm.
we kind of just stack up that Broncos offense and just hope that we get an actual decent offensive performance from them.
Yeah, and we don't get the Hackett experience again.
You know what's
Um,
crazy about this Broncos offense, and like maybe it's just because it's Hackett, and maybe it's because Russ is a little bit washed, but like they're like 29th through 32nd in like all scoring metrics outside offensive scoring metrics outside of field goals, which they rank
mhm.
seventh in the league in field goals per game. So
Wow.
turn some of those damn field goals into touchdowns and
Yeah.
get some points on the board, some actual
Well, I
points on the board.
wonder I wonder if I mean, you'd have to manually adjust for it, but like week 1 where they had 3 goal line fumbles
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, like I wonder how this offense ranks if Gordon gets in once and Javonte gets in that other time. I think it was 2 in week 1 and 1 in week 3 or something of that nature.
It
And then
was,
all of a
yeah, and
sudden
it was on back-to-back drives in that first
Mhm,
game where Melvin popped one out and then Javonte came in and popped one out, and it's just we might not think of them all that differently because there's been some struggles elsewhere, but I'm sure we think about that offense a little bit differently if they found the end zone on those 3 drives, and hopefully they can have a little bit more red zone success tonight. It's kinda what I'm banking for on
mhm.
my DraftKings lineups, and we're a little bit invested here now too.
Yeah, no, I love that. You got time for one more? I promised you 40 minutes. We're right up against it. You got to build some lineups, huh?
Yeah, let's rip
Yeah.
one more. I'm having
Okay.
fun, and I'm learning, which is nice.
We want to do the 2 game one again. I
Yeah,
think
let's
it's
do
more
the 2 gamer. I
enjoyable,
like
right?
the
Yeah.
format's a little bit more fun there in terms of just a traditional roster.
Yeah, I like that. What's your process for Showdown tonight? Like have you crunched yet? Have you built yet? Have you
I like to
w-
wait for inactives.
mhm.
I've got 3 kids, and kickoff time is right around bedtime slash supper time slash daddy and me time. So I usually try to get a preliminary build out just so I've got something that I feel comfortable with if I have to submit
Mhm.
it. But generally, I'm waiting until inactives come out to really dive into things. Still using Fantasy Labs, although shout out to the Solver. The Solver is getting closer
Yeah.
to like being able to support the things that I like to do in terms of building, and
Were
generally
you
that's
part
just
of
kind of
that building process?
yeah. So like the process that I use on labs is a lot of
Mhm.
correlated boosts, both
Okay.
negatively and positively. I generally in the past had been a guy that was very much into like locking certain things that I thought were more likely to happen. But as I've gotten more into like the research and what's historically been successful, so many things in these single game formats can win because football is a very random game, and anything can happen in 60 minutes of football. So I like to
Mhm.
correlate things that I think are more likely to happen, but not lock them. So
Mhm.
Labs has that nice thing where you can just provide a boost. If X happens, then Y. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
if Saquon Barkley is in my lineup, then boost X player by 10% on his base
Yeah.
projection. So we get
I
the
like
nice
that.
influencer 101 here. So we get to
Yeah,
stack
let's
up the
go.
Saquon. I like that.
I
But
I
then
was
but then there's also things that I like will intentionally rule out, and also things that I'll intentionally boost. I'm pretty high
mhm.
on Alec Pierce just based off of his kind of the way that he's been able to earn targets through the first couple of weeks of the season and the way that he's scoring further down the field. So I'll go through and just kind of make adjustments to our base projections. on in terms of like what I think his range of outcomes will be, and trying to give me more
Okay.
of somebody like that. But then I'll also look through after I've built my lineups, and I've got a process kind of that I use. I don't really feel comfortable sharing because I don't know how accurate it is, but just kind
Mhm,
of
mhm.
a deduper or a duplicates predictor based off of certain factors: product ownership, cumulative ownership, salary, certain correlated pieces, and
Okay.
then I'll try and determine how many times I think a lineup will be duplicated, and then kind of filter through those lineups and submit the ones that I think are most plus EV. But the problem with that is like predicting dupes in DraftKings Showdown is so difficult. So
Mhm.
there's just a lot of variables that can impact that.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's very cool to pick your brain on that because I've never been a I've never been a multi-entry showdown guy. I've done it for milli makers and stuff like that before I realized how. Oh shit, we're on the clock. My bad. Um, okay, Pittman went there. We can take Ryan. Do you think there's a big difference between Ryan and Jones, or do we want to focus pass catchers here?
Yeah, I kind of like Judy, but I haven't really looked into the Lazard stuff. So
Okay.
I like
Well,
Judy
let's
as
take
a
Judy first.
yeah.
And then, do we think there's a difference between the pass catchers, or are we comfortable running a Daniel Jones plus Saquon?
Is Daniel Jones clean on the injury report?
That I do
I would
not.
imagine he
It says
is. Yeah,
limited practice
limited in
Wednesday.
practice.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
or
I'm
they're
not really
still
sure.
in.
I want to
Which
roll
one are
with
you
you
getting?
here. Yeah.
Okay, I right now have been gravitating towards this because it doesn't fall as much as you would think to here. And I don't obviously don't love running back in that game environment,
Hmm.
but I also don't know how owned it'll be, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm when he falls, when AJ Dillon falls in that spot, to be like completely frank, in the first contest, I didn't get any of it. So my eyes gravitate towards there. Whereas I have a lot of Lazard plus Barkley in that mini game correlation, which is obviously more optimal. Um, yeah,
And
that's just
that's an interesting point because, running back in the same game. Now it's a little bit different because Nyheim Hines is kind of viewed as a pass catching specialist, and the whole meta
mhm,
has been the slate's been flipped on its head, as they would say, just based off of the Jonathan Taylor stuff being ruled out. But if had Jonathan Taylor played in this game, I mean, like in DraftKings Showdown, Jonathan Taylor plus Melvin Gordon would have been pretty unique, just given
mm,
that it's tough to project them both to quote unquote get there
yeah.
in the same game because of the game environments that they respectively need. So I think that making that unique pairing is really sharp there.
Okay. Okay, we can wait on quarterback, so we're
Hmm.
stuck with Daniel Jones or whatever. Tight end gets pretty thin if we want to go Mo Alley Cox here, and then we end up with like a little mini. But if we're comfortable just getting any of the other tight ends, we could make a little one of these as the run back on the mini Judy there.
Yeah, let's go Pierce. I just talked about being high on him. I think that there's
Yep.
a pretty big ceiling there, and the way he scores, I think, is going to be better for half PPR long term. Down the field, big
Mhm.
time catches, get in the end zone type of thing.
Okay, so now we're pigeonholed to that was our last skill position player. So it's tight end or quarterback. And since quarterback is already locked in, we can either make this correlation or we can go off the board here.
Let's do the DJ Bellinger little
Okay,
stack there. I like that.
cool.
And I
Yeah.
like
And
that
I,
as
and
much
I,
as much as you can like a Daniel Jones,
right.
Daniel Bellinger stacked. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, when you set out to draft, and it's one of the cool things about these contests, but it's also one of the infuriating things about these contests is you cannot, like, we would not set out to build most likely would not set out to build a Daniel Jones, Barkley, Bellinger with a running back run back,
Right,
right? Like
right.
we would not set out to build that construction, but we kind of got pigeonholed into it. But then it's also kind of like, well, maybe we're unique now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Which, as we know, being unique is the only thing that matters.
damn straight. Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'll take Daniel Jones here and round that bad boy out, and maybe we run hot tonight. Maybe we get a little
Yeah,
piece of
let's hope
something.
so, man. Yeah, it's been an interesting start. Anyone that follows
Mhm.
me knows how hard I tilt the captain kicker, captain DST stuff in DraftKings
Yeah.
Showdown. They've gotten there so many times. It feels like already through the first 4 weeks, we've seen multiple winning lineups without a single quarterback, which is just very rare in DraftKings
Mhm.
Showdown. Like 5% of all top 1% finishing lineups have just rostered 0 quarterbacks, and now we've seen it win twice in 4 weeks.
That's
I'm ready for
crazy.
like as normal a showdown slate can be. I'm kind of ready just to get back to like give me some pass catchers, give me some running backs, give me some quarterbacks, and just let me move on. But it's a
Yeah.
42-point total. It's Matt Ryan. It's Russell, a washed up version of Russell Wilson. So trust me, I am nervous for the way tonight's going to go.
Yeah, me too in some regard. I am nervous because I built my cash shell already, and I think I left. I don't want to definitively say, but I think I left like 15 to 2,200 off the table or something like that in a cash build. Like it's kind of I don't
I
know about
was
this game.
I was building preliminary lineups that had, were sitting around the 46K mark. So get comfortable being uncomfortable tonight because there's going to be some weird lineups out there.
Yeah, I love that. Cody, thank you so much for doing this, man. This was a lot of fun. I love to pick your brain, especially. Honest to God, there's no one I'd prefer to pick their brain for these isolated one-game slates like this. Anytime you're available, as these contests change going forward in the future, and we got some new variables to discuss and jump in some drafts. Love to have you back, and this is great, man. I appreciate you. But before you go, I need the infamous flag plant.
Okay, I'm not going to run it back from the ETR show.
Oh
Some
yeah,
of you
yeah.
probably listen to
Don't
the
give that
ETR
away.
show.
Don't give that away. Make them make sure they watch
I
it.
don't want to double up because the users, the listeners deserve something different. Let me think about. Okay. Dink gave out Mike Boone, which is an amazing call. Shout out Team Preseason. I gave out Alec Pierce on the ETR show. Go check out that show with Drew. It was really fun to pick his brain as someone who talks through correlations and stuff like that better than anybody I know. Okay, I got to roll with somebody who is a guy that I'm high on relative to market, a name that is not sexy at all, a name that we talked about way too many times on this show in a draft style format. Eric
Uh,
Sobert. I don't know how to
yeah,
say the name, but my
sauerkraut.
God, my boy is going to score a touchdown tonight. I think he's in the winning DraftKings lineup. I think you'll be happy if you drafted him as a way to get unique in these style of contests where there's 5K up top. Eric Saubert ran a route on 83% of dropbacks last week, is going to be out there for a majority of those dropbacks again this week. Shout out Eric Saubert. I think he's going to be in winning lineups tonight.
I love that. Great shout. Appreciate you being here. Good luck to your Cornhuskers and
We
good
need
luck
it.
tonight. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Appreciate you. All right. Everybody's favorite time of the show. The end. See you guys tomorrow.